Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Our guest today is Heath George, the founder and executive producer at Clockwork Films. Heath's journey is nothing short of inspirational, marked by perseverance, humility, and an unwavering commitment to his craft. From growing up on dirt floors in Broken Hill to pursuing engineering at ANU, Heath's path took a significant turn when financial challenges led him to follow his passion for film at Charles Sturt University. In our conversation, Heath opens up about the core values that have driven Clockwork Films to success. He shares his belief that emotional intelligence, resilience, and strong communication skills are essential qualities for any producer. Heath also offers a unique perspective on trust, arguing that it should be something that you lose rather than something that you earn. With remarkable honesty, he reveals the financial costs of not measuring performance accurately, estimating significant losses over the years. Heath's honesty, vulnerability, and candor during our chat are truly admirable. They not only reflect the character of the man, but also offer a blueprint for a leadership style that many aspire to, but few actually practice. I'm a big fan of Heath, and I think you'll find this conversation as insightful and as inspiring as I did. Heath George. Heath George, thanks so much for jumping on. Really appreciate you taking the time. To kick off, do you want to just give us a bit of a background about who you are, how you got started in the industry, and where you've got to now with Clockwork?
Okay, thanks, Brenton. Who am I? Wow, that's a big question to start off with, straight into the existential stuff. I don't know where to start. Everyone starts with their job, right? They sort of go, I'm an executive producer. I started Clockwork Films, which is coming up to 20 years next year, which is pretty, I think it's an achievement I'm proud of. But who am I? I think that's a trickier question. And I think that's changed over the years. So I used to think of myself as a broken hillbilly, which is where I'm from. And occasionally, and like everyone else, defined by my job, but that's become just a part of my life. But I would say who am I is an evolving thing. And I think really important to be self-reflective and emotionally intelligent is something you can actually work on. So I would say I would like to start with values. So, things like kindness, generosity, humility, developing other people, those sorts of things, I guess I value, and starting with the ethics and what kind of value or contribution I can make to people. And so I would say I've shifted my mentality from, pursuit of happiness or success or even wealth to pursuing meaning. And maybe that's just reflective of having great hairs. But I would say that's who I am at the moment, at least.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you're ever evolving, I would say you're in a great space. If you're ever learning and ever growing, I think that's the essence probably to life. You got a background, I believe, in script editing, motion graphics designer. I think you've been an art director, FX makeup, sculpturing, model making, stop motion animation. I think you've done directing as well. You're an executive producer. What was the driver, and why did you find such a draw to doing that, and then also starting Clockwork?
Yeah, why filmmaking, and with that sort of eclectic mix of interests and backgrounds, I guess. Well, I grew up in Broken Hill, as I mentioned, and it's got a really great arts community, and I always loved fine arts. I drew and painted, and I'd get down in my dad's back shed. He was a landscape gardener and mowed people's lawns after I saw my entire extended family working on the mines, and that's a very short life. And I remember my dad coming home from shifts, and he would always be sleeping when everyone else is having fun, or he'd work underground, and he would have migraine headaches and cough up black stuff. And it was just not a very good life. And I saw my uncles age prematurely, grandparents die underground. cousins, brother-in-law have accidents. It's a very difficult and challenging life, and it's a pretty short life. So I didn't want to do that, and I enjoyed art. I was pretty good at school later on. Being dyslexic, I struggled early on, but I sort of am someone that works quite hard and at problems. So my school principal convinced me to drop all this art stuff and focus on my real subjects. So then I did that and ended up, I wanted to do engineering because I like building things and I like science and I like doing things with my hands. So I applied for the Air Force and I didn't get in. It turns out when you do a psych evaluation with the Air Force, not everything's a test. If they ask you to take a seat, that's not part of the test. So I did appallingly on that, and I started ranting about the thing, not wanting to hurt people, basically, which is a little bit contrary to what the military does. But I guess I don't want psychopaths. But anyway, I ended up that helped me get into engineering at ANU, and it was partly the cost of staying there. And when my dad passed away, I couldn't afford to stay there and they wouldn't offer a part-time option. They talked a big game about diversity and inclusivity and access, but in reality, it was the course load didn't allow you to have a job. And the accommodation at most universities was more than my parents' combined income. I literally grew up in a cottage in Broken Hill. When I was a kid, we had dirt floors, which not a lot of people believe, but that's how it was. So I couldn't really afford to stay there. And then I was also had done films, short films and artwork, continued that passion. And I was just obsessed with movies. I'd watch everything. And a lecturer helped me get back to Canberra. The idea was to get back into engineering after my dad passed away, but I couldn't afford to be there. Worked at the National Film and Sound Archive. Absolutely loved it. Joined a film club there. Was screening, working in the bio box, screening the old movies and slicing up the film and fixing and repairing all the old film devices and recording devices. Absolutely love that side of it. Got a job at Channel 10 working as a script editor, did a screenwriting diploma at night times. And then Wagga was kind of both. I actually wanted to go to VCA, but you needed a chunk of cash to do your short film at the end of that. I didn't have that. I found Wagga. It was cheap to live in Wagga. I could do the film course and I could have a full-time job. I managed Hog's Breath Cafe actually while I was in studying full-time as well. And that got me through uni and I absolutely loved it because I got to, I joke, you don't expect to be taught anything at university, but it's a great place to learn. So working with other students, I got to make lots of films. I could afford to be there. And then that sort of launched me on the rest of the path. And I think what attracts me to filmmaking is it's that combination of technical and creative. So we're called Clockwork Films. And what I love about Clockwork is if you look at clock and the mechanisms of how a clock works, you can see the care and intricacy and craft in it and all these pieces working together. But there's also a lot of creativity. But what I really like about it is you can see the hand of the creator in a clock, in clockwork. And I think especially with technology and challenges and this whole conversation around AI, that seeing the hand and craft of people that are passionate and that human aspect in things that you create and you can sort of send out into the world, I think is a really appealing thing. And that essentially appeals to, despite my principal, who I loved very much and would sneak off and have a whiskey with, which probably wouldn't be acceptable these days. But, I was probably born to be an artist on some level.
I believe you started Clockwork in 2007. And it was, you and your business partner and one computer. But how did you gain your experience as an executive producer, jumping straight in, starting your own company?
Yeah. It's a good question. So we incorporated in 2007, and we were actually formed a partnership in 2005 before we incorporated. And there's two on reflection. I didn't know at the time, but there's two great things that started Clockwork. The first one is a bad boss, and I've learned from some really great leaders over the years, but I don't ever learn as much from them personally as I have from the bad bosses. And sharing a bad boss was very motivational to go do my own thing. We were basically looking at this person thinking, well, we're making them pretty well, they were killing it off the strength of our ability and talent. And we thought, well, we can do this better. And what we didn't like about why I would say that person was a bad boss is because they didn't care about people. That was the bottom line. And that was really important to me. So we thought, well, if this person can be this successful using us, why don't we just go do it ourselves? So I learned a lot from a bad boss. And the other thing is, when you're young, the naivety and the lack of experience can seem like a disadvantage, but it's a real advantage because you don't know what you don't know. So you just go do it. And you don't realize how hard and impossible some things really are. If I had all the knowledge I have now then, I probably wouldn't have started a production company because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no connections. I didn't go through the normal path. I didn't go to the right schools. I didn't have the big network. I didn't work at all the agencies and have that strong foundation of contacts that would give me work. It was basically just a couple of kids who could shoot and direct and figure out how to produce things and make stuff on a computer and combine a love of technology and art to figure out, we'd been editing our own fun films and stuff. And then we sort of got out there and somehow managed to convince a few people to pay us to do it. And I remember sitting in a Newtown flat. It was super hard to find a house back then. It was worse than it is now. There was 100 people lined up around the block for every apartment. A friend of ours was leaving. We got in there. We had no furniture. I think we had a 20-gallon paint drum we were sitting on and some outdoor furniture. And I'd been working at Channel 9, and our fridge was empty, but Kerry Packer used to give away this amazing Christmas hamper. And so we were broke. It was hot. We had no fan, no fly screen, one computer that used to blow heaps of hot air. It was one of the old Apple G4s. And I was eating caviar, drinking champagne, and eating smoked salmon courtesy of Kerry Packer, and then trying to bootstrap a business on the side. So, it's pretty fun and wild, but, it's a big advantage to not knowing what you're doing because you just go do it.
Which is a great way to ask. I usually leave this question to the back end, but if you were to go back and tell yourself now, if you had the ability to, what would you actually say to yourself back then in 2007 when you started the production company?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And to be honest, I'd be scared to give myself too much advice. I think I would just say, go for it. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. There's a danger if I gave myself advice. Like I might say something like, go work in a bunch of big agencies and hone your craft, build a network, all those sorts of things that will make it easier to break through. There's the risk that you get too good at your day job and you get comfortable and you take that safe path and you don't go out on a limb and 100% commit. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be really hard to build something and to make something. So I think there's a danger in thinking about how would I do it differently. I mean, of course I've got regrets, everybody does, but yeah, I'd be really cautious about what advice I'd give to myself. But I think if I was giving advice to people coming up through the industry, I would say, think about what you're willing to firstly, think about what you want. Deciding what you want and going for it is more than half the battle. If you don't know where you're going and what you're aiming for, then you're not going to get there. I mean, that seems pretty self-evident, but it's true. And be real. If you want to be a director of feature films, unfortunately, it's not an industry where you can easily manage relationships and work-life balance and all those other things. It's not a 9-to-5 job, and it's not going to happen if you stay in your hometown. You've got to go where people are making films, and you've got to meet people, and you've got to just go make films until someone decides that you've made enough, well, not someone, but basically tell enough people you're a director until one day someone believes you, basically. So I would tell people, figure out what you want to do and commit to it. And to be honest, coming from a low income background in Broken Hill, I had a lot of income insecurity. So I probably pursued the path of advertising because it's a combination of filmmaking and all that creative fun stuff, but also financial security. And you can actually, it's a bit more like a job. I mean, it's occasionally it's not 9-to-5, but on the whole it is. So I think it's going in with your eyes open, 100% committing, figuring out what you want to do and go for it. And if you want to be the filmmaker or make the TV show, you've just got to go do it, and you've got to go where it is. And you've got to be a little bit selfish in terms of the people around you, I think, if you want to make it, or at the same time, don't dream about it and not do anything. Because I meet lots of people that say, I've got this great idea for a film, and they talk about it forever and never do anything. The big difference between the ones that do and don't make it are the ones that it's not the great script. And to be honest, you figure out pretty quickly that a lot of people funding films may not have even read your script. They figure they can employ a writer to make it better if they need to. It's really that person that has the drive and energy, and people invest in you as a person because they think you've got the drive and energy and tenacity to actually make this thing happen. And that's the only way you can make it happen.
And with Clockwork, has your success been through just sheer determination and a willingness to just make it happen no matter what? Or has it been that you know that you've got the skill sets above and beyond other people, and you know how to run a business and you know how to make it work within the industry that we're in?
If you asked me that 10 years ago, I would say it's the skills and being able to disrupt and look at how you make a project cheaper and who you really need, and also just not having that tradition or expectation of how things should be done. So you just go do it in the way that needs to be done. And, when we were first going around talking about how we can produce and direct and edit and do motion graphics and visual effects and all those sorts of things, that just kind of confused everybody. They were sort of like, look, I don't understand. Are you a producer or a director? Are you a DOP? Are you, it doesn't make any sense. Now that's not unusual because of YouTube and content and social media. So I would have said it was all those things originally, but the last 10 years, and reflecting on that, it's actually, I think the success comes down to values. It's all about what you believe in, who you are as a person, your relationships with people. You're trying to treat your suppliers and clients like friends you want to look after. When people come into our office, you'd like to treat them like a guest, and it's about having fun. And at our core, we've only really codified our values in the last sort of 5 years, but they're excellence in production, humility in relationships, and joy in service. So excellence, humility, and joy. There's other values we have, of course, but those values as a guiding light, and even employing people around values as opposed to skill, has been when you go leaps and bounds. And it's also my advice if you're starting a company. When we began, we were doing a lot of the work ourselves. And then we had sort of other people come in and work with us. But you're constantly in this cycle of boom and bust as you're looking for work, doing work, looking for work, doing work. It wasn't until we stepped out of the business and worked on it instead of in it, and actually started empowering other people and developing other people and representing people, and being more generous and not front and center, the company really exploded. That's when you invest in other people, there's that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I very much believe that. So I would say the secret sauce ultimately is values.
Give us an idea then. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it then, Heath, when you're actually doing a project. Give me an example of how the values play a part in, let's just say you've got a campaign that you're putting together for an agency and the client. What are the values and how do they show up in the process from start to finish of a project?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So excellence, you're always striving to do the best work you can and to really once you commit to a job, our attitude is it doesn't matter. All the conversations about budget and limitations and what you can and can't do and all those sorts of things. Once you say yes, then you have to treat it like that job is just as important as the $1 million job you wanted to win or the creative one. So that's about a mindset. So once we're in, we're 100% in. That's the first thing, and treating every job the same. And it's about putting your best foot forward and sort of coming up with creative ways, and also just knowing your craft and working with good people. And then humility is about people make mistakes, and it's a very complex and challenging industry. And what we do is there's a lot of unknowns. Mm-hmm. So you can't predict everything that's going to happen in a production. We just don't work in that world. The weather is a big one, but there's lots of things that can go wrong. But if you have humility and work with people, then you're always going to come out on top because, I don't mind if one of my team members makes a mistake, is if they come to me with humility and say, look, how do we get out of this? We work together, we get through it. And if you go to agencies and clients in the same way, then the people begin to trust you, and trust is essential to moving forward. And then also joy, it's got to be fun. I mean, if you don't love this industry and love what you do, it's very hard to sustain the momentum. And I've had periods of burnout, and that's mostly come around when I've taken it too seriously and not had fun. And also you got to remember, like, your client might only get on set a couple of times a year. It's fun. It's great being on set, taking photos with all the crew and the film equipment. And and for creative agencies too, you've got to remember it's they might work on a strategy or a campaign for 18 months, get it through the client. You've got to come to that with the humility of, these guys know the project. You can't just walk in and say, well, everything you've done so far is terrible and I'm going to do it better. You have to respect all the work they've put into it. And then also once they engage us, that's the fun part for them, and we need to make it fun. So it needs to be fun on set, and that's not to say it's not professional, but it also needs to be an enjoyable experience. And if you're not having fun, then why are we doing it?
So we all look at the fun stuff and the good times when they're happening, but I think you were mentioning before you learn more from your bad bosses. I believe you learn more from your mistakes that you make, or the errors that that pop up, or things that catch you off guard, maybe you weren't putting enough time into. But can you give me one or two examples of, say, things that happened to you that may have, an error or a mistake that you learnt more from going through it than if it hadn't happened to you at all?
Absolutely. Fortunately, we've never had a serious accident where someone's been badly hurt. So I think that's because if you value people and you put safety as a very high priority and low tolerance to risk there, then you can make other mistakes, but not the important ones, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not saving lives, we're making commercials, and they're fun and there's big money behind them and big expectations, but we're not saving lives. In terms of mistakes, definitely made a lot and learned from them. I think this is a really good opportunity. I think there's two paths in life. You can choose to trust people and they can earn mistrust through either abusing your trust or maybe just incompetence. and you can coach people through incompetence and maybe earn trust back, or you can go through life mistrusting people and they earn your trust. And I think the upside of trusting people, which is what I do, is that it empowers people. You build these fantastic relationships, and it's just an easier, more joyful way to go through life. If you start by mistrusting everybody, the upside is maybe you don't get hurt or harmed as much, but the downside is you just don't have those relationships and connections, and those things in life give it meaning, and you just don't get as much out of people. But the mistakes in that is I've definitely had some situations where I've trusted people and it's cost me enough money to hurt. So, with partnerships with people in other businesses or affiliations, we've had situations where, stolen money, or even just incompetence of you just get complacent and you're not managing producers or projects carefully, and they're just getting complacent, and you lose money. So learning from those lessons, I would say trust and verify, not trust but verify. So I guess the big learning is I'm still in the trust first, lose trust category, but I would be more, I think it's really important as a organization to measure performance. Trusting people, you're empowering people, but you're also verifying performance, so you're not finding out too late that you've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, I would say that my strategies maybe probably lost over $1 million over the 20 years worth of production, but I think it's a valuable lesson.
Two of the, probably, if I think about it now, two of the biggest mistakes I've had. One was around not keeping finances. My record keeping wasn't the best, and things, invoices get missed. Nothing in the volume of hundreds of thousands. And then the second one was committing to something that I didn't understand fully, and saying yes to a project and jumping into it, and it was animation, not understanding the process, and then catching myself out, and it making it even tougher. Honesty, I believe, is being honest. I know we do want to make a living, and we want to, do the work, any work that comes towards us. We want to, look at it and go, yes, I can do it. But I think being honest with the people and being about what your capabilities are and what you're able to do, and then also putting your hand up and saying, look, I need a bit of help, or I don't think my experience is giving me the grounding to actually do this process.
Particularly by people asking for help, it's really difficult to. Well, there's some really good research that says for every year you're in a toxic culture or a bad boss, it takes 1.5 years to recover. So, and there's another research study that says your manager impacts your health more than your doctor, which is a crazy thought, but that sort of speaks to the responsibility and obligation leaders have to the people they lead. It's very difficult to create a culture, if people have been at other places in particular, where people ask for help early and often. But it's super important, and that's why humility is a really important thing, because again, if you tell me you need help early in a project, I'll move heaven and earth to support you and to get the barriers out of your way. If you tell me the day it's due, it's a different conversation, and it's a lot more challenging. But I would also say, I think it's important to be candid with people and upfront, and that means you may miss out on opportunities. But at the same time, there's a saying: if you're not in over your head, how you don't know how tall you are. I think it's a really good thing as well to put yourself out of your comfort zone, because you won't grow if you're always comfortable. So those stretch projects, maybe you need more support, maybe you need to be upfront about what your level of experience is. But I would definitely encourage people to go for them, because it's when you're a bit scared shitless, to be frank, that's when you really grow in leaps and bounds.
Now, Heath, you you're known with a bit of a problem-solving prowess, so I've been told.
Okay.
Filling a backyard with ball pit balls,
Mhm.
managing car commercial logistics with mileage constraints. So
Mm.
can you give me an example of the toughest problem-solving gig you've come across in your time at Clockwork?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, producers are kind of a weird bunch. But it's really interesting because I've spent time. So since I've done an MBA and done board certification, I've spent more time with people that have had corporate careers.
Mm.
And I've realized they think really differently to producers. There's a lot of great research that diversity and inclusivity increase the capacity and the options, and there's a lot of benefits for organizations. But it also, there's good research that shows that it is more difficult to arrive at a consensus when you've got that diversity. But my point there would be diversity of thought is a really important thing. It's not, we sort of tend to focus on very superficial types of diversity, gender, ethnicity, neurodiversity. But I would caution against recruiting people that have had very similar backgrounds and experiences, because it's the diversity of thought that's very important. And so, in a roundabout way of answering your question, all of the big challenges that I've faced and solved, partly it's my tenacity, but it's also getting on the phone and reaching out to people that are smarter and more experienced than me and asking them what they did, and getting help and talking to people and just going to people and saying, this is my problem, what would you do? And people 9 times out of 10 will go out of their way to help you and solve the problem. So I think you can't undervalue relationships. They're so vital to a producer's toolkit. Having the experience to solve problems is great, but having the humility and the curiosity to ask for help and get other people to help you is definitely part of it. And in terms of a specific example, big tourism campaign straight after COVID, borders open, the planes are all, they've mothballed most of the fleet. They don't have engineers to certify planes. There's no accommodation because the tourism industry is decimated. And then we're commissioned to do a massive campaign in a huge state, going up and down the state 3 times, and somehow have to get 1.6 ton of equipment and 30 people around, and do it all in a couple of weeks because they're desperate to relaunch the state. So I would say that was probably one of the biggest challenges. And a couple of the crew got COVID in the process, and including myself. And the airline lost our equipment multiple times, and it was a very emotional job, but we made it through, and we produced a product I'm very proud of. So I'd say that was probably one of the biggest challenges.
They didn't happen to lose your lenses or anything like that, did they? Camera bodies or anything?
They certainly did. But my theory is some of the times when they lost our equipment, it was just a calculus on fuel and tickets, and they could get there. But yes, it even included trying to get alternative gear in the middle of the night, and me driving all night, and a tree getting hit by lightning and crashing down in front of the car, and sending the rest of the crew ahead, and all that sort of fun stuff. So, but at the same time, you really feel like you're doing something, and you get very close to the crew when you're on a big project like that. So it can be really challenging in the moment, but there's also lots of fun to be had. So
makes a good war story as well around the water.
Yeah,
cooler,
war stories are fantastic. War stories are how you kind of learn and share experience and knowledge, and they're just fun. And I love war stories.
It's always great to hear other people's worries, what happened, what went wrong, and then how they have to fix it, and the problem they have to, because again, as a producer, you're constantly having to problem solve. It's just part and parcel of the job. And staying with producers, what other standout qualities do you believe make a great producer, particularly in today's industry?
Look, things like technical experience and knowledge and all those sorts of things are sort of the base level. But I would say that essentially a producer is a leader and they need to be a really good communicator. So I would say emotional intelligence is the most important thing. It's that ability to reflect on your successes and your failures. It's and the good thing about emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, is you can develop it. It's elastic, and you can work on it and improve it. So I think having a high emotional intelligence, having good relationships, good conflict resolution skills, calm under pressure is another good one. But also that self-awareness, which is part of emotional intelligence, of noticing when you're getting stressed or you're under stressed, and noticing when your team are under stressed before something breaks. So just recognizing in yourself, what are my stress triggers? What are my early warning signs? What's the canary in the coal mine? Understanding that, and then really understanding when people are stressed, they're less receptive to alternatives. They're less creative. They're more likely to go for cliches. They're gonna not perform at their best. They're gonna burn out. And also, as a producer, I think it's really important to manage your performance, because you can't perform at peak all the time. You need to recover. And a lot of athletes talk about, and I know zero about sport, but a lot of athletes talk about recovery being as important as the training period. And you need to do that as a producer as well. You need to build into your life those things that recharge you, whether that's hobbies or social life or your partner and family. It's that time between projects for reflection that make you a good producer long term.
I've been told as well, Heath, that you're very good under pressure. You're very calm, and people wouldn't really know that if you are stressed. When you were on the tools, or when you are producing a job, are there techniques, or is there a way that you look ahead to see what problems may occur and already consider solutions to them? Is that something you think about or actively do when you are producing?
It's a good question. People do comment that I always seem to have a bit of a calming presence. I think is, again, about emotional intelligence. It's about resilience. And it's also about perspective. It's if you've actually experienced insecurity, hardship in your life, then problems to do with a commercial are pretty trivial. And so it's not the end of the world. I'll give you an example. I've got a sort of, just a bog standard new SUV, and it's got sensors and cameras and it beeps a lot. And somehow I still managed to reverse into a car the other day. And I realized I was ignoring all the beeps and alarms because there's so many of them. And some people are kind of like that. They beep and alarm so much, and they spend so much time worrying about everything that could go wrong, that they become pretty ineffective communicators. So you need to be a bit conscious of that. I would caution against trying to figure out I've got a saying, I don't like to solve problems I don't have yet. So on one hand, experience helps and working with your team, and you really need to know, there's a saying, race car teams work on their brakes so they can go faster. So you need to understand what your risks are and your risk appetite and tolerance and capacity is, so you can go fast and far. But the key is trusting your own abilities to get through a problem, sticking with a problem while you're doing it, and trusting the people around you. There's a sort of saying around, Microsoft talk about it. They're saying if you take our 20 best people, Microsoft is nothing. it's about getting the right people on the bus before you figure out where you're going and what you're going to do. So I would say, and again, like directing actors, 99% of your work is casting. So I would say the same thing as of a producer. It's not necessarily about, being some stoic freak that's immune to stress. It's about building the right team and trusting the people around you and trusting in yourself that you can solve the problems as they come up and communicate clearly with everybody, because the agency are your partner and they want to know what's happening. And if you tell them in advance and treat them with humility and respect, then they're going to feel like they can trust you even when things go wrong. And often when things go wrong is when you strengthen your relationships with agencies and clients, because if you deal with a problem well, then they'll feel like that they can trust you with their project or whatever.
And on the subject of trust, when things do go wrong or they come off the rails, do you like to communicate that with the client or with the agency?
Yeah, I like to talk early and often. I like to also come to them with a solution. Our production and producers are in the job of solving problems. That's the service we provide. And we're also there to limit their liability, because if you're a big agency, there's an advantage to, if a campaign doesn't work, you can sort of move on to the next production company and potentially not lose the client. So that's part of your role, is to solve problems and that liability. I like to go to the agency with solutions, but I like to communicate early and often. So, for example, if you have a discussion about weather that's candid, it's always uncomfortable. No one wants to think that their shit's going to be rained out, or that their equipment's going to be lost on a plane. But if you talk about those things openly, honestly, and you have a plan for it and you know what the costs are in advance, that's a much easier conversation than having it on the day it's raining. We include overtime, an indicative overtime rate on our quotes, because that way people have an idea of the worst case scenario if you go into overtime. And there's no point talking to the agency producer or account manager when you're 5 minutes away from going into overtime and you haven't got your shot list. If you talk to them before lunch, when you've still got time to change the schedule around, drop some shots that aren't important, and work with them on a solution, or even say, look, we may need another hour based on how we're tracking, or they're going to try to catch up time or whatever. Again, that's a much easier conversation because they've got options. The trick of bringing problems to your client and agency is to bring it to them when they still have autonomy to make a choice. The conflicts happen when you bring a problem to someone and give them no choices. It's too late then. Then that's not let's solve a problem together. That's a conflict. And then you're going to damage your reputation. And also, I feel at that point, it's too late. So I've actually would coach my producers, if they're bringing a problem to a client when they don't have any choices left, then we've been negligent in our duty of care and diligence. And we would 9 times out of 10, I would encourage our producer to pay for that out of our budget, because we've not brought them the options. And it's the same with our directors. The sort of old school approach is the director does the creative treatment and the producer does the budget, and then they sort of fight it out, and the director asks for things and the producer says no, quite often, for the budget. Instead, we have a principle of radical transparency. So we do the budgets together based with the treatment, and then we go through it with the director. And then we say, look, we're currently over. What can you live without? What are must-haves? We'll submit a budget that's on target. We'll submit a budget that is how much it costs to do everything we've been asked to do. And we'll submit something in between based on our recommendation. But working with the director, going through all the problems with them, having that conversation before we even win the job is much easier than when you're on set and they say, I want a helicopter. and you have to say no, and they have to trust you that you don't have, because there's an assumption if you don't tell people what the criteria is, that there's heaps of money and you're just trying to protect profit. And in fact, that's quite often not the case because the margins are quite tight. So I would say communicate early and often and give people options and respect that, they've got a job to do too, and make your producers and your account managers' job easy and make those with their client and give them the information they need to show that the situation's been managed, they're in control, and give the client choice on how to proceed.
We've talked about producers. Let's talk about directors. You've obviously had your fair share. You've done directing yourself. You've had your fair share of directors work with Clockwork and for Clockwork. What makes a standout director?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What makes a standout director? Over the years, I've met some really talented, wonderful people who haven't made it. And it makes me wonder why. And they get very frustrated seeing directors who are much less capable. I mean, I've been on set with really high-profile directors with very impressive campaigns under their belt that couldn't tell you what an f-stop was, have no idea about much of the filmmaking process. So what makes a successful director might be slightly different to what makes a standout or a good director. And if the two things if you sort of do that Venn diagram and they overlap, you get those amazing directors. I would say fundamentally it's people skills and relationships. It's building those networks of people that enjoy working with them and back them and believe in them. It's having a strong vision. It's getting out there and doing it. I mean, someone asked me, how do I become a director? And I said, well, start directing things and keep telling people you're a director until people believe you. And being so on the big five personality traits, being a little bit disagreeable is a good thing for a director, I think, because it's a very collaborative process. And if you're a good listener and you get the most, and you're a good leader and you get the most out of your crew and cast, and you can incorporate that into your own vision, but also fight for your vision, then by being a bit disagreeable, then you're going to make great work. You're going to push the work. People are going to see your work, be it an ad or a film or a TV show or whatever, and recognize it as your work, as you. And that doesn't mean you have to have a gimmick or a look or whatever, but if you put your vision and personality into it, then you're going to stand out. And it's always about pushing it, but knowing what to push and when and what's important. So, there's a lot of directors who have a bit of insecurity and they will say, I need the best DOP, I need all the best equipment, I need the best editing house, I need the best composer. And what they're really saying is, I don't have the experience or confidence to know what's important, and they're never going to make enough money to be sustained long term. So, yeah, it's really challenging, but I would say it's the directors that are very talented but don't make it. They usually fall over in not valuing relationships enough and not getting out there and self-promoting. And that doesn't necessarily mean, go to networking events. But it does mean if you get an opportunity, definitely don't stick the client and agency in another room with a monitor and keep them out of the way so you can direct. Part of your job is building a relationship and collaborating with those people so they want to keep working with you over and over again. Because if you think about like a creative director, they're only going to get so many good projects in a year, and they're only going to get so many good projects in a career, and they might change agencies, which sets them back a little bit. They're probably, if I'm a creative director, I'm only doing 4 big shoots for the year, or maybe I'm only doing 1. The director I choose is very important to my career. Am I going to get an award for it? Am I going to enjoy the experience? Is it going to go well? Is the client going to be happy? Am I going to be able to become an ECD eventually because of these choices? So the idea of picking the same director twice is a big decision, right? And if I worked with a director 3 times, that could be a significant proportion of my early career as a creative director. You need to respect that as a director and give them a really good reason to want to keep working with you, because everything in the industry is working against them wanting to work with the best director they can afford, because it's in their own interest, it's in their client's interest.
Heath, you sit on the CPC, Commercial Producers Council. What are the biggest problems facing production companies in Australia in this present moment?
Yeah, so the Commercial Producers Council is an open committee of all members. So it's usually EPs and owners from all the top production companies. The biggest challenges are crew costs. They've gone up. I think they went up 80% in 1 year following COVID. We went from 8-hour days to 10 hours. The equipment's gone up, but the budgets haven't matched. In fact, they're going the other way because there's more channels. So the crew costs are a big challenge. And it's not that production companies don't empathize with the cost of living increases, but it's very difficult to pass on those costs. And you also get a lag, because there was a period there just after COVID where we submit a budget, and then the couple of weeks after we get awarded and start booking crew, the rates had gone up. And that was happening a lot. So, and then the extreme version was in the building industry, where that happened and the building industry collapsed. And we've seen a shift of jobs to different centres. And we've also, so, you know, when Sydney became more expensive, people went to Melbourne. Melbourne got more expensive, people went to Brisbane. So they can move around a little bit. And then some of the overseas jobs don't come in as well, because there's a perception you get expensive. So that's the biggest challenge. And because if you think about it, a big corporation is going to set their marketing budget a year in advance. They know how much their ad is going to generate revenue for a product. They know what percentage they want to spend on marketing. So there's a big lag. So that's the biggest challenge. We've gone for a big wage increase. People are talking about AI, but and there's it's the full spectrum from optimism to pessimism. That's interesting. And the other big challenge, I would say, so the standard payment model has shifted from first and second 50 to 3/3, and that's reflective of the fact that to cash flow projects, the margins aren't as big as they were, and that reflects the fact that the first 50% no longer covers the out-of-pocket upfront costs. So it's a mature industry, it's more competitive, all the supply costs have gone up. The expectations are ever increasing because of multiple channels. People are seeing examples of AI. You know, I made this Volvo commercial in 24 hours, so that expectations are increasing. And I could comment more on that, but yeah, I'd say that those are the major challenges, and it's all the things. With the other thing is, we're losing really great companies at an alarming rate, and we're losing studios, we're losing that capacity. The film commission, film funding model is boom and bust, so it drags people out of the industry. You lose all that capacity when they go to a big film, and then the film finishes, and then you've got all these people that don't have work. And you're seeing production companies winning awards after they've gone into administration. So, it's tough out there. But, if you love it, go for it, buddy, I guess.
Heath, AI. Like you said, you mentioned before, there's the whole gamut, the spectrum, where there's complete optimism and then there's just absolute pessimism. Where do you see AI fitting in to our industry over the next 5 years?
That's a really good question. It's sort of the topic du jour, I guess. I'd start by saying narrow neural networks as AI have been around for a long time, and they're they've infiltrated a lot more of our lives than we probably realize. So, for example, the majority of jobs that were filled in the last couple of years were filled by people that weren't actively seeking jobs. So what's happening is organizations like LinkedIn are scrubbing your profile, your behavior, your friends, and figuring out when you want to leap, and then selling that data to recruiters, and they're approaching you and headhunting you, and you're getting matched to jobs and filling jobs before you even know you want to look for a new job. And that's the majority of jobs. So, and it's everything. It's what choices supermarkets make in terms of their pricing and the quality of products in your local supermarket. It's how much your insurance company charges you. It's how teachers are managed in schools. It's policing and using it in resourcing. And these things have been around for a long time, insurance companies and stuff. A big fear is in finance, a huge percentage, almost up in the 80s and 90s, of trades are conducted by AI. And my caution there is AI trained on statistical models. They're very good at predicting the past, which sounds paradoxical, but that's data is the past, and you're making predictions and probabilities based on data sets. So when those black swan events happen, like COVID, that's when AI falls over. So you need to be really careful when integrating it into your business. In terms of how it affects our industry, we've been using it for a long time, right? So camera tracking, pixel tracking, rotoscoping tools, a whole bunch of other things. Gaming industry has used narrow neural networks for a long time as well. So all those tools have been around to assist artists. And I would say, personally, I think it's going to be very similar to when animation transitioned from analog to digital, because people thought that was the end of animation. But instead, it freed artists up to do more of the creative stuff. And another example of essentially elastic demand. Another example of elastic demand has happened in programmatic media buying. So a big thing that's affected our industry is how we buy and place media. So once upon a time, it might take a week to buy media, figure out all the channels, all the different material you needed, target it, match it all up manually. Now that's done by an AI, can be done in a couple of hours. It's actually more effective, more successful. You would think that would mean all the media buyers are unemployed. But what that has done, because of elastic demand, is once upon a time, you might not pursue a client with under $500,000 or $1 million media spend. Now you can effectively go out and sell media for $100,000 or even $10,000. And instead of that local restaurant only advertising at a cinema, they can now do a targeted ad campaign with micro targeting to people in their area that are interested in going to their restaurant. So the demand in that case, you would assume that level of automation of programmatic media would result in massive job losses and replacing media buyers. It's done the exact opposite. And I think you're going to see very similar in the creative industry. And it's not to say parts of the roles will change and parts of the industry will disappear and move and become other things. But I think demand is going to be elastic, and it's going to help. So like visual effects artists, instead of spending time rotoscoping, they can do more fun creative stuff, and there'll be more projects. There'll be more opportunities to create. It'll be integrated into a tool. And I think it won't be a case of AI will replace production companies. I think it'll be a case of the production companies that are really good at utilizing these tools, and probably have been in the past, will be more competitive than the ones who don't.
Well, Heath George, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, mate. A man with such humble beginnings, dirt floors, making his way up through the universities, starting his own company. And here we are today in 2024, chatting all things, including AI. Appreciate you taking the time, mate. Great insight. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You're welcome. To steal a line from Flight of the Conchords, started at the bottom, worked really hard and got to the bottom, and eventually got to the bottom.
Well, that's it for today on Make the Logo Bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.